So this is part 2 of our ADHD episode, and I don't have a formal definition here, but I have that ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and that is actually a terrible name for ADHD because I've also heard it described as having too much attention and then like not knowing where to put it, right? It's not really a deficit at all. And then the other part is that a lot of people are inattentive. And so we're not hyperactive at all. So ADHD is actually a terrible name to describe like the disorder that it is.
What's the name of the man who?
Russell Barkley?
Yes. So his video, if you search him on YouTube, he explains things so well. And the way he describes it was so helpful to me, because when I realized that throughout my life, and even when I started working with my previous therapist, she would tell me that I was so self-aware, and I knew all of the things that I needed to do. I knew what was wrong. I knew why I wasn't doing it, but I was still unable to do it. I was still unable to properly direct my attention. And especially if I'm not if I'm not able to kind of keep myself on a regular schedule of eating and sleeping and taking care of myself in those ways, then I find it impossible to figure out how to direct my attention. So I'm hungry, but I need to shower, but I'm tired and I don't know what to do. So I end up just sitting there paralyzed on my phone for like an hour because I don't know where to direct that attention. I need to eat, but I also need to shower. What do I do first? I don't know. So I do neither.
Yeah. Dr. Russell Barkley actually describes it as this. It doesn't matter what you know. You can know all of the things, but you won't do it. It's a disorder of performance, not knowledge. You know exactly what you need to do, but you can't bring yourself to do it.
Yeah. It's tragic. It's painful. It's so painful. And I think like the way that ADHD is just described, and I saw TikTok on this recently, but the creator was saying that the way ADHD is being described in popular culture, the way that it's been talked about for years, for decades, really trivializes what is a very devastating disorder that causes significant impairment and significant interpersonal and professional stress in your life throughout your entire life until you figure out how to get it treated. It is severe, it's serious, and it's so painful when you are somebody like us. Like, we grew up being told how intelligent we are, and then the fact that we still struggle with what are seen as such basic tasks, it is painful. Like, it's painful to be told like you're intelligent and you have so much potential, and yet why can't I figure out whether to go take a shower, brush my teeth, or make breakfast?
Because it's true, you do know exactly what you need to do, but it's the act of doing that is so hard.
Yeah.
And to highlight the severity of untreated ADHD, people with untreated ADHD have greatly increased mortality rates, and their life expectancy can actually decrease up to 25 years, which is nuts. And that kind of stems from people with ADHD are more likely to be impulsive. So they'll eat more, they'll be obese, they're more likely to develop eating disorders. And they're more likely to develop addictions, more likely to have like impulsive sex, get STDs, more likely to speed, drive recklessly, get in a bunch of car accidents. So it is very imperative that if a child is suspected to have ADHD, then you at least look into it, because on the flip side, ADHD is also one of the most treatable psychiatric disorders. There is medication that has been proven to work, and it will work for, I think the stats are like 70 to 80% of the population. And the risks of people with ADHD to get addicted to the stimulants is lower than the general population. So it's like pretty safe medication. It's been tested and it's been proven to be highly effective. I think during our last ADHD episode, I kind of made light of the ADHD medication, and I don't want to dissuade anyone from trying the medication because it is actually very, very effective. I think Dr. Russell Barkley said 80% of people with ADHD, adults with ADHD, tried medication in their lifetime. So if you are struggling, I would highly recommend talking to a doctor, a therapist, and just figuring out a treatment, because as we can see, like leaving ADHD untreated can get very, very bad.
Mm-hmm. In both of our cases, I think we've both developed throughout our lives, unhealthy behaviors and unhealthy habits. And I think in a lot of ways, a lot of them actually really just stemmed from the untreated ADHD. And I think that there's so many branches off of this that can happen. So you could be a kid who is struggling a little bit with attention and focus and learning unhealthy procrastination strategies. And you could have an adult in your life who's caring, supportive, and who's helping you to learn better strategies, who's giving you positive attention, positive reinforcement, helping you learn how to work with your brain and helping remind you that you are not broken. However, you could also branch off in a different direction. And if you don't have people in your life who are providing that positive attention, who aren't helping support you and helping you develop healthier habits, because as kids, we need people around us to be helping to shape us and mold us. If you don't have that attention that's saying like, oh, my child is a little bit different and needs some more support, then you kind of just go your own way and try to cope in whatever ways you know how. And often they may work for the short term, but then they end up being maladaptive. And they end up being really difficult to eventually change and to eventually develop healthier habits. So it's just so unfortunate because there's so many great strategies that are so helpful. And yeah, they're easier if you learn them when you're younger, of course. But so many of us, unfortunately, are adults who end up just sort of floundering, making tons of mistakes that could have been avoided because we weren't given the support and attention that we needed for our very specific emotional, sensory, and attention needs.
And when you learn these coping methods as a child, you're better equipped just to deal with the day-to-day life. So when you didn't have coping mechanisms like I did, you turn to alcohol. You do a whole bunch of things that are impulsive, like you drive fast, you get speeding tickets. And like if you learn the coping mechanisms as a child, then you don't grow up thinking you're a broken adult. And like just not having that thought is like, will save your life. 33% of the inmates in Canada have ADHD. So like just if you don't accommodate for these people, if you don't teach them how to cope, if you don't welcome them and love them, like they find trouble because that's just what we do. We're impulsive. And things can go bad in so many ways.
And also not only the impulsivity, but I also want to touch on the fact that like you said, it's also a deficit. I think we talked about this in the last episode, but it's a deficit not only in self-love, but in community love, and the lack of community love and family love kind of feeds into that lack of self-love. Truly, I think the cultural narrative right now around like self-love and self-care is a little trivial seeming. Self-care is not just go to an expensive store and pick yourself up a $60 bag of bubble bath and throw it in there, and that's self-care. Like it's so many aspects of your life that feed into literally your personal well-being. And so people that end up in the prison system are very often, I would say, I don't know any like individual stats, but I would say probably 99% to 100% of those people have childhood trauma. And there's so many ways that we can mitigate not only the financial strain on our country, on our system, which is obviously something that many people will talk about. They'll say, oh, we can't invest in XYZ, we can't invest in education, we can't invest in community care because it's too expensive. I'd like to say to those people, like, consider the expenses of all these people that end up without parents, and then they end up in the foster care system. These people that end up making choices in their lives based out of desperation and fear and stress and trauma that end up in the prison system. And then after that, it's very difficult for them to get jobs. It's very difficult for them to have consistent home, and they may end up back and back and back again in the system. It's a deficit in community care and love, and it's really painful to for a lot of people to consider it and think about it, because they don't want to accept that we all have a responsibility as a society and as a community to make things better for people, to make things easier. And of course, this is like a very large, very complicated issue that requires input from a lot of different places. But realistically, it's not just somebody with ADHD who makes one wrong move and ends up in prison. It's most likely that that person was not given enough support from their parents. Their parents may not have been equipped to help them. Their teachers may have discounted them as that distracted kid who won't stop talking during class and getting up and being annoying, and the teacher stopped giving them positive attention, or maybe has even shifted to giving them only negative attention. There's so many factors that feed into it. And I think a lot of kids that grow up with ADHD end up having traumatic experiences at school with their families, because people don't understand and aren't willing to put in the time and effort to help them grow. Mm-hmm. And then they're just traumatized, and
it's internalized, and then it becomes a part of who they are, and then it takes incredible amounts of change and work in order to undo all of that.
Right.
Like once you're in the system, you're kind of in the system.
Right.
Unfortunately, and it's extremely hard to get out of it.
Exactly. And we're both extremely lucky that, despite that we've both gone through our own struggles and our own trauma, that we at least have had many privileges in our lives that have allowed us to at least just transform or begin to transform the pain that we've been through in a healthier way. But many people don't have those options and don't have those resources, and in a lower income home or with less resources, or going to a school where the teachers were extremely strapped and just didn't have the capacity or time to invest in students. Like, it really is a social issue on behalf of the entire society and communities. It's not just an individual thing. Mm-hmm. But you're right, like, kids do internalize that. Mm-hmm. And once you've internalized, like, I'm bad, there's something wrong with me, it's so hard to change that.
Mm-hmm. And another aspect of ADHD, it's described as the diabetes of the brain. So it's just a disorder that you live with. That's just it. You have to do things daily in order to manage it. Like, you don't take a pill once and it's done. You don't go to therapy twice and then you're healed. It is a continuous journey throughout your entire life. And I think that kind of makes it a little bit harder, because we are impulsive and we do like novelty. But it's like you need to be reminded to kind of go back to grounding yourself, to kind of going back to yourself and figuring out what it is that you need in this time. So I think we could probably talk about the things that helped us with our ADHD. Mm-hmm. And that would be one of the things that has helped me, is constant reminders to myself everywhere, all the time. Like, my calendar is booked and I basically have it blocked out half hour by half hour what I'm doing my entire day, because the Google Calendar app will send me notifications. So I actually have reminders: drink protein shake, walk butters, eat lunch, do work, have dinner, work out here, water my plants, literally my entire day. I think that having a day of the week where I plan in advance, so I'm kind of forecasting what I want in my future. For example, I want to be healthier and I'm running a marathon in a month, half marathon in a month. So I have to schedule in my runs so that I know that my run will take half hour and I block that time out. So I don't double book myself for anything. And tasks always take time. You can't just have yourself a to-do list with 100 items and be like, oh, I can get that all done tomorrow. There's a limited amount of time that you have, and you can't just have a whole list that you're like, oh, I can do all of that tomorrow. You know what I mean? It sounds like you do. So I time block everything and assign everything time.
See, I know what you mean, like logically, but when you said you can't just have a list of 100 things because tasks take time, like I look at my to-do list and I'm like, yeah, that's realistic. It absolutely is not. And one thing that I've struggled with is, and maybe we'll talk on this a little bit more, but I think, most people with ADHD, if not all, struggle with time blindness. Like we really deeply struggle to figure out how long something's going to take us. And so I don't always put things in my Google Calendar. And I find that when I'm not consistently doing that, things aren't getting done, things are being forgotten, or I end up, my work ends up bleeding into other areas of my life, like I have, allocated less time for eating and sleeping because I haven't accounted for the fact that this task is going to take a fairly significant amount of time. And even as an example of a good day, so there was a day where I had a bunch of different tasks planned out. I had to go to a few different stores and I had to complete a couple of work tasks on my computer. And when I actually started putting them in my Google Calendar, I realized I may need to take a couple of these things out. I also need to schedule in eating. I also need to schedule in the time it takes to drive and account for the fact that a 15-minute drive actually takes 25 minutes, because you have to consider, I think, a 15-minute drive, perfect, I'll leave at 4:45 if I have to get there at 5. Mm-hmm. But actually, there's time for me to grab my water bottle on the way out the door. Oh, maybe I want to make myself a tea. Oh, I have to put my shoes on.
And for me, I have to find my keys because I'll probably lost them.
I never lose my keys, and you know why? Because I have a bag. It's a little crossbody bag, and inside that bag is a little plastic clip that's attached to the bag. It came with it. The plastic clip is attached to my keys. My keys are always in my bag. And you know what else is in my bag? In the front pocket, I have my 2 credit cards that I use most often. I have my driver's license and my health card. And I also put my receipts in the main pocket, and the main pocket is just big enough for my phone. And this is the bag I carry around every single day. The keys are always stuck on the loop. You know why? Because I would lose my keys every fucking day. Where did I put them? I put them in the basement, on the side table. Why? Yeah. Who knows? They're in the living room, in the couch cushions. It just doesn't make any sense.
That's my issue. I think I'm constantly changing purses.
Yeah.
And I hate carrying a bag too, so I'll always use my pocket. And I forget keys in old clothes. And I'll have to go digging through my laundry basket.
I can't do pockets anymore. I just can't. I would love to just put stuff in my pockets, but I just today I put on these pants, and inside the pocket was a piece of my headphones. The little rubber pieces that go so it's comfortable in your ears. Mm-hmm. So I just can't do pockets. So yeah, I have my little crossbody bag. My keys are stuck to it 100% of the time, permanently.
Another idea, I always tell people that are close to me to remind me all the time. I tell them, I promise I will not get mad if you remind me again, because I'm gonna forget. Mm-hmm. So just ask me again.
Yep.
Ask me all the time.
Yeah. Or if somebody runs into me on the street and they're like, oh, hey, I would love to chat more with you about collaborating with PlantJoy on XYZ. And I tell them I'm not going to remember that. That's not the first thing I say, but I'm like, oh, it's so nice to see you. That sounds great. I'm not going to remember. Please remind me. Please send me a message. Please send me an email. Email's nice because I can categorize it. I can put a little star on it. DMs get lost. I'm like, send me an email. Let me know exactly what we talked about and everything that you want. I will get back to you as soon as I can. And I think for anybody, even if you don't have ADHD, consider the mental load of how many things you're keeping in your head that you just don't need to be doing that. You could have an external brain dump list. And right now, I don't think this is that helpful, but my brain dump list is a text message that I send to myself, and I just copy the text and I add stuff to it. And then I paste it and I send it to myself again. again, this is not a good system, and I still really haven't figured out a good system for myself. There's still emails that get missed and stuff that doesn't get done, and I really deeply struggle with organizing my time and time management. Even still, like this ADHD episode is not us being like, here we are, we have conquered ADHD, and now we are here to tell the masses what we've learned. Like, I struggle every day. And like you said, and I think it's Russell Barkley that said this, Dr. Russell Barkley, I think this is a quote from him, but saying that the ADHD is like diabetes for the brain. And I think that that's a perfect analogy because if you have diabetes, you know, like you have to constantly track your blood sugar. You may be taking insulin at multiple points throughout the day. Like, I don't know that much about managing diabetes, but I do know that it's an intensive thing that is an ongoing thing. And if you miss a dose of insulin, or you misdose it, you take too much or you take too little, the blood sugar crash or the increase in insulin can be extremely harmful or fatal. And so it's something that if you're somebody who struggles with ADHD, you know that this is daily practices, which, like you said, is what makes it so hard, because daily
we forget.
You know what? I told you once, I said, I feel like my brain is like the movie 50 First Dates. And I wake up and every single day I have to remind myself what coping strategies are helpful for me, what like affirmations I need. And so one thing I've been working on, I actually went to the dollar store and I bought those sticky blackboards. So it's like a blackboard chalk sticker on like a giant roll. And I plan on putting 2 or 4 of them on my wall and have a really big blackboard and get like chalk markers and write down, you know, kind of have one quadrant for like affirmations, things to remind myself of, like, don't forget, here are some things that are helpful for you. Because when I'm overwhelmed, my logical brain shuts off, like it does for all of us. When we're overwhelmed, we go into our lizard brain, our amygdala is more activated, and our logical brain shuts down, and it's really hard to access the things that we know are good for us. It's really hard to remember, oh, just do box breathing. If you're feeling like if I haven't eaten enough for a while and I'm feeling nauseous, like ginger kombucha really helps me, and then it kind of like gets me able to eat again. Like, there's so many things that I know help me, but I need them written down because I will forget. And then I will stay struggling instead of taking these strategies and helping myself get out of the hole.
To add on to that, that's basically kind of using object permanence to your advantage, because for us, if we don't see it, then it's not top of mind. Like, what's that saying?
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I can have a whole bunch of stuff in boxes and I'll open it and it's like brand new to me again. Like, oh, I had this? Wow. So I think that's a brilliant idea. It's one way of giving yourself reminders, and having it on your wall is a direct way to remind yourself all the time of like what you need.
Absolutely. And I think doing it in a kind and gentle way too is really important, because just as an example of this as well, I still sometimes set alarms for things I know that I need to do. So sometimes the night before, I will sit down, look at my calendar for the next day, and I'll set an alarm. So if I know I have a meeting at 3, I'll set an alarm for 2. And it'll say, hey, don't forget, you have a meeting at 3. You'll probably need to leave around 2:30. So it goes off at 2. That gives me a half-hour buffer. It doesn't go off at 2:30 when I need to leave, because if that happens, then I'm a little stuck, because it goes off at 2:30. I'm like, oh crap, I need to leave, and I have food all over the kitchen. I need to clean that up first. I need to do XYZ before I leave. So it goes off, giving me plenty of time as a reminder. But that being said, I've been even kinder about the reminders than I used to be. So I used to set myself reminders, and sometimes they would be really aggressive. Like, it'd be like all caps. It'd be like, leave for meeting, don't forget. And it would be so aggressive, and I'd read it as if I was yelling at myself. And that doesn't feel good when you're constantly yelling at yourself internally. So what I started doing, I even have a bedtime alarm, and it's like really cute, and it has a bunch of emojis, and it says "Get ready for bed, cutie butt," and it has one of those little hand heart emojis and like a little mushroom. And whenever I see it, I'm like, oh, cute! Like, left me a reminder so I can start getting ready for bed. That's nice. Like, I do want to get ready for bed. I do want to get cozy. I do want to wind down so that I can have a successful transition to sleep and a successful day the next day. When I used to set myself these yelling, angry reminders, I would feel shame. And like we talked about in the shame episode, shame is not helpful for our long-term well-being as a human being, but shame is also extremely unhelpful for, professional life and for productivity. If you're constantly feeling shame, you're going to want to avoid things because they're causing you more emotional turmoil. So it is hard. It's a hard practice, but try to learn to be kinder to yourself. Slowly but surely, things will get easier for you because your body and your brain know that tackling tasks, it feels safer. It feels less scary.
Mm-hmm. That was really good.
Thanks.
Another thing that people with ADHD struggle with is motivation. And we have no internal motivation. And I know you've actually come to this realization, but I always show up on time, or like try to be on time, when there's other people involved. But if it's just me, I will gladly be like, oh, whatever, it's not important, do it later. But if there's somebody else attached to it, I will hold up my end of the bargain, whatever that was, and I will usually show up for them because I'm very accountable to other people. And I think I lucked out in that regard because of my entrepreneurial family. They've always required me to do things. And luckily, I show up and I get them done for them. So I think maybe that's probably why I'm a little bit able to manage my ADHD a little bit better right now, because I've just had to do tasks all the time for my family and our businesses, and I've just had to show up, and I've had to figure out ways to make it work for myself so far. So yeah, that would be an idea for people to manage your ADHD. One way that I use this is that I set up co-working hours on Mondays and Fridays, and I might even add more hours. But so I set a container of time where I tell people I'll be online and I'll be on Zoom and we can co-work together, which is basically just like us working in each other's presence. If nobody knows what co-working is, you don't work on the same thing. You just each work on your individual projects, but together. And I think ADHD people call this body doubling sometimes. So just by the mere fact of me telling other people that I'm going to be here at this time, like I actually show up when I do it. Even if nobody else shows up, I'm still there and I'm showing up for myself in that sense, and I'm getting some work done. Mm-hmm. So that's been super helpful.
Yeah, body doubling is very, very, very helpful. I think it can be. I think for me, what I've learned is sometimes there's other factors that are making it harder for me to be focused, and that I need to attend to my more basic needs first. So often if I have a body doubling time scheduled, and again, because I struggle so much with time, sometimes the body doubling is, if it's scheduled at like 2, I'll realize at like 1:55 that I haven't eaten yet, and I'm actually quite hungry, and I don't want to body double and sit down and work because I need to eat. So sometimes I will get on the call and I'll start, and I will just, and the other person will be working, and I will just make myself food. Sometimes I have to just have that level of understanding of myself and self-compassion, even with my best intentions and my best efforts. Sometimes what my plans are will end up being delayed because I have struggled with this for years, and it does take significant effort and repetition to get into the habit of it. So maybe you have plans to start your work at 2:00 and you realize you're hungry and you need to attend to those needs first. Okay, fine. So you start at 2:20.
You can still hop on the call and you can still show up, but maybe
Exactly.
your work will be feeding yourself first. And then after you do that, you can get into your actual work.
Exactly. And I think that kind of ties into, I don't know if anyone who's studied psychology, or maybe you just know about this, but if you've ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think that that's incredibly helpful to understand. but essentially it's a pyramid of needs. And if you don't have the needs met on the base of the pyramid, you can't really move on to these next needs. So the base pyramid needs are, like sleep, physical safety, like having a warm home to live in, having access to regular nourishing food. And if you're not meeting those base pyramid needs, it's going to be really difficult for you to get to the top of the pyramid, which is self-actualization. Mm-hmm. So as ADHD entrepreneurs, I think I've been so hard on myself in the past because I do have all these lofty goals and so many ideas for myself and so many things that I'm incredibly excited about. And not only am I excited about these things, but I know that I'm creative. I know that I'm intellectually capable of handling these things. And I actually know that the ideas are good. I have confidence. However, if I'm not meeting my basic human needs, it doesn't matter how good my ideas are. I'm not going to be able to execute them. And that's something that's been so hard for me to realize. It's been a really tough lesson throughout my life, I think. And maybe it was easier for me in my teens and my early 20s. Maybe I could push my body more than I can now. And I did. And I abused my body. And, I would chug black coffee and stay up all night studying for tests. I would skip a meal, not for any kind of weight loss purposes, but I would skip it because I was so immersed in what I was doing and I didn't trust myself. I would go, I have to study. I have to finish this now. I can't just get up, go make myself food, take a break, sit down, and then just let all of my adrenaline calm down and go away. And then what if I can't get back to my task? So I would abuse my physical body and my emotional, energetic body by not allowing myself proper rest, not allowing myself proper space where I wasn't thinking about work. And that was true when I was in university. And that was also true in the first years of entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. I abused my body and mind. And so burnout hit me like a truck. And it's been actually a multiple year journey. I think it's probably been about a 3-year journey or so in really learning how to heal burnout, not only from my years of entrepreneurship where I worked like 18, 20-hour days, sometimes 36 hours in a row without sleep, without regular meals, but also all the times I did that in my master's, in university before that, even in grade school and high school. So if you're somebody with ADHD who can relate to what I'm saying, I want you to know that this is a lifelong healing journey. This is not something that you're going to just be able to read a list online for tips for ADHD and go, flip a switch, okay, I'm cured. It's like I have to remind myself to eat. Otherwise, I may not do it. And then 6 hours later, I wonder why my blood sugar is so low, why I feel like shit, why I'm emotional and can't concentrate. Mm-hmm. Or if I'm really focused on a task and I stay up and do it till 3 a.m., it's going to affect me the next day, whether I have to get up early and I lose out on sleep, or whether I sleep in and then I feel groggy and sluggish. This is a daily practice for me. So
I think it's a daily practice for most people, but for us with ADHD, it's harder. It's it takes us more effort to get to the same baseline where everyone else is at.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I think so many of these things are second nature for people. You're hungry, you get up and eat. And it's really frustrating for me that these things that are just basic, meeting my own human needs, are often so difficult for me. And I think I felt so much shame for that throughout my life. And lately I've just been working on really, really learning deeply self-compassion. So I don't know, we'll probably get into that later at some point too. But
so that kind of ties into another idea that I was going to bring up later, but I'll just bring it up now. People have basically like a fuel tank of energy that they have dedicated that they use to do daily tasks every day. So our fuel tank is just smaller than what everyone else is dealing with, unfortunately. And that just means that our energy gets depleted faster, and we need to spend more time deliberately filling up our energy reserves. And one of those ways is by eating. So I never really understood why, but when I was hungry, I just don't want to do anything. I'm like, just feed me, please, and then I will talk to you. And I never understood why until I listened to this talk by Dr. Russell Barkley. And I'm like, oh, that's why I don't want to do anything if I'm hungry. Like, that's why I need to eat. Like, just feed me.
Yeah. And this is the basic human need. Actually, I wrote this down. And if you have ADHD, I think it's incredibly helpful for you to write down. I have a Notion. So if you've never heard of Notion, it's like an organizational app, essentially. Note-taking app. And I have a note called Mental and Physical Health Habits and Reminders. So here's what I've written. If your car was out of gas, you wouldn't stand there and hit it with a crowbar and expect it to run. You have to go fill it up with gas. It's non-negotiable. So if you're feeling physically or energetically depleted and finding productivity to be difficult, you cannot win by punishing yourself, by speaking to yourself unkindly, neglecting your physical needs, or denying yourself energetic relief. In fact, this will inevitably put you back. As frustrating as it is, these are necessary for your survival. I wrote this down for myself because you know what I used to do? I used to get 4 hours of sleep and then be mean to myself as if I could function. And for years, I really did function on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours of sleep regularly. And guess what? Over the long term, your body will start to shut down. Your mind will start to shut down. And we wonder why. We sit down to do a task and it feels impossible to get going. And I realized that my body and my mind were pushing back against me, going like, what the fuck are you doing to us? We can't do it. We can't live like this anymore. Like, please, like, give me something. For a long time, I would just be angry at myself for having needs. I would try to pack my schedule. I'd pack every single minute of my day with anything other than anything for myself. After a long time, that caught up to me. And now I have to be very deliberate about making time even once a week to cook a little bit extra than I do on the other days so that I have food ready in the fridge. Because if I don't have it ready, and I'm also having a lower energy day, there's a very low likelihood of me getting the proper nourishment my body needs. So it's like, if it sounds frustrating and annoying and you think about it, if you're somebody with ADHD who hasn't started developing these habits for yourself, you'll quickly realize that, like, in order to keep up with daily life in the way that you want to, it's just going to take you significantly more effort than it may take somebody else. And that sucks. There's a grieving process that goes with that, with realizing that you just don't navigate the world the same as other people. And it's like, it's sad, honestly.
It's not that it's wrong. It's just like the world wasn't designed for us.
I know.
We're just extra creative people.
Extra sensitive.
Extra
spicy.
We just have to make our own path in this world.
Yeah.
And we are.
Yeah. But yeah. And I think also the fuel tank analogy also is very similar to if you have heard of the spoon theory with chronic illnesses. I think we talked about that, right? Yeah. So if anyone is not aware of the spoon theory, I find it incredibly helpful. But it's like imagining that at the beginning of your day, let's say you started with like 15 spoons, and each task you do takes away some of your spoons. So if you had a really stressful work meeting, like maybe that took 6 of your spoons, or if you had, your dog woke up and puked and you had to clean it up in the morning, that's going to take a significant amount of that too. But on a normal day, maybe you go through your day and and maybe there's not a whole lot of spoons being taken up if you're neurotypical or if you don't have a chronic illness. But for people who are neurodivergent or have a chronic illness, maybe getting out of bed takes you 3 spoons. Whereas for somebody who is neurotypical or doesn't have a chronic illness, maybe getting out of bed doesn't take any of their spoons. They're like, I'm happy to get up. I'm just going to roll out of bed. So we deplete our energy reserves, our spoons, sometimes more quickly than other people. Sometimes the things that we do take more energy than other people. So it's hard for people to understand. Why is it so hard for you to just get up and take a shower? Why is it so hard for you to just go into the kitchen and make yourself a meal if you're hungry. It's like, okay, well, sometimes I barely have enough spoons to eat a meal, to just put the food into my body and chew it and sit down and do that, let alone to make a meal from scratch. So if you can relate to this at all, I really hope whatever you take out of this, that you will just be kinder to yourself, because like Tina said, the world was not set up for us, and it's just harder. It's harder for us.
Yeah, and in the same vein, like, you can do things to get more spoons back, to refill your tank, and it's important that you do them all the time and that you don't forget to do them. Maybe set reminders for yourself. Like I set reminders to work out, to drink water. Sometimes I used to have like a water alarm go off every hour. And even if you're sitting all day at like a sedentary job, set a reminder to get up and go for a stretch, because exercise is another way that you can refill your energy tank. And Dr. Russell Barkley also says that it could actually increase your capacity to take on more. So it's crucial that everybody exercises, especially people with ADHD.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I wonder, maybe this isn't fully in our wheelhouse because neither of us are like personal trainers. But I
used to be a personal trainer.
You used to be a personal trainer? There's so many things. I learn something new about you every day. Well, then maybe Tina can give us some tips. But I think it's not something that I really can speak on, because I don't really have a great exercise routine for myself. But one thing I can say is that it's much easier to build it up in your head. It's okay. What am I trying to say? Regarding exercise for myself, I can really get in my head about needing to do it in a certain way, especially because in the past I have followed people who do like really intense, like high energy workouts, or who lift a lot of weights, or who just work out in a very specific way. And sometimes when you're consuming that kind of content, you can kind of get it into your brain that that's the only way to exercise and to quote unquote like be good enough, like to do exercise well. But that's not true at all. And most days, if I get out for a daily walk, that is a massive success for me. One thing that I've tried to remind myself of is anything that can make it more likely for you to do a positive habit is a good thing. Mm-hmm. So, for example, like if you are trying to learn how to move your body more, for me on super low energy, low spoons days, one thing that I will do is I'll put on my noise canceling headphones. I will walk around the block and watch TikToks while I walk. And I'm like, great, I'm getting my exercise in. And I'm also doing an activity that maybe I would normally try to limit. Like I would try to limit my social media time normally. But if I'm pairing it with an activity that I know I need to do for my health and well-being, it's kind of a win-win. If anyone's read the book Atomic Habits, I listened to the audiobook. I found it incredibly helpful. But that's one thing he says is basically if you're looking to build a new habit, pair it with something that you already want to do, or pair it with something that helps you remind you of it. Another thing I started doing, which I don't do it every single time, it hasn't really solidified into a habit yet, but when I go to feed my dog, I'll do like 10 squats. Like I'll put his food bowl down and I'll do just 10 body weight squats. And that's like little things like that I'm trying to get into the habit of, so that if I don't make time for a full workout, which most days lately I don't, at least I'm moving my body in some way, because every little bit does count. You don't have to punish yourself for not making time for an hour-long workout if that's not in your capacity right now, and if that is not a habit that's built into your calendar yet. But you can do little things that will over time improve your capacity and also improve your confidence, so that you kind of have more confidence in yourself to build more of this into your life.
Yeah, you said a lot there, and I will agree with you. I'm not one that pushes a specific type of exercise for anybody. Any movement that you do is good movement. Even if you're starting off small, I actually use the example, like if you just walk around your house in circles for 2 minutes, that's an improvement on what you did yesterday, and we'll take it. So really, like, it's all of the little things that you do, the baby steps you do that add up into the bigger steps. And sometimes the baby steps are so small that they seem ridiculous and that they're not worth doing, but they are 100% worth doing, because it's the incremental movement towards the direction that you want to go in that's important. So you do the tiny habit, you celebrate it, and then you do it again next time, and you celebrate it again. And it's really important to celebrate all of your wins, because that's what's gonna keep you motivated to go and continue those habits in the future. So Jordan mentioned Atomic Habits by James Clear, which was a really, really good book. He talks about making the habit obviously easy, making it attractive, and I think making it rewarding. There's a couple of things that he said. But so in your example, you made it easy. It was just a walk around the block. You made it attractive because you listened to music and you were watching TikTok. And you made it obvious. You didn't do that, but like, that's the idea. Just do tiny little baby steps and celebrate it. And then another thing that you said, listening to music. We grew up in like a new technology era, and my mom hated headphones, and I wasn't allowed to have headphones or music on for like most of my life, because like, oh, these kids these days, music, ugh. So I never grew up with headphones. But recently I bought noise canceling headphones, and I wear them all the time, and it just makes life so much more enjoyable to have a soundtrack that you like in your ears. And I know you do it too. I started wearing it to Costco. Game changer. I just zone everybody out. I'm listening to my music. I'm jamming. I go buy what I need to buy, and I'm out of there.
Oh my God, you have no idea how much easier it's made my life to accommodate my needs, to just say, hey, this thing is like excruciatingly painful and uncomfortable for me to do, but I still need to do it. Why wouldn't I want to make that easier for myself? Why wouldn't I want to make that more pleasant? And if you're considering it in terms of, because I always like to make an analogy of like if you were taking care of a child, because I want to make it very clear that I think many of us who are neurodivergent have been essentially beat down throughout our lives by people in our lives telling us that we're too much, that we're too sensitive, and essentially saying that your sensory needs are not worth being accommodated because you're not worth accommodating. And I want to be very clear that if you can make your life easier in any way, please do it. If you want to wear noise canceling headphones to Costco, do it. When I started doing this, it changed my life. I used to go to Costco and I would get so overstimulated. The lights are so bright. It's so noisy. And then when you get up to the checkout, and where you're waiting in line for 15 minutes sometimes because the lines are so long and it's just beeping, I would get so overstimulated that I would itch my skin to it just felt like I wanted to just crawl out of my body. And yet Costco is one of those things on my list, especially as a business owner. There's a lot of things that I get from Costco for my bakery. So it is a need to go there. And yes, I can use the apps, but they are more expensive. So for the most part, I try to do it myself. And if you can make your life easier, like wearing noise canceling headphones and like Tina said, having a soundtrack for your life, and I walk through and I play music that makes me happy, or I can listen to a podcast, or I can listen to an audiobook. And now I'm pairing this activity that's incredibly unpleasant for me and sensory overload and overwhelming, and pairing it with learning about something I'm interested in or playing happy music and also blocking out the external noise. I am able to get the task done and actually not hate it the whole time. Another thing I've realized for myself is I used to force myself into uncomfortable clothing. This was more in my early 20s, and especially before I came out. I think when I came out, I started learning that I could start to develop my own personal style that was more authentic to me. But in my early 20s, I used to wear a lot of tight dresses, tight skirts, super, super tight pants, low-cut shirts. And I found that I was always adjusting myself. I was always really hyper aware of my body and how things felt on it. Like tight clothes, just for the most part, don't work for me. And so pretty much all the clothing I wear consistently now is like looser. It's more sensory friendly. I don't wear itchy clothes anymore. I cut off all my tags. Again, if you have ADHD, this may be relatable to you, and if you can find ways to accommodate your sensory needs, it just makes your whole life easier. If you're too busy focusing on how your itchy tag is scratching you and it feels like somebody's like behind you with sandpaper the entire day, how are you going to be able to focus on what you're doing? You just can't.
Mm-hmm.
But we weren't really taught these things. And
No.
if you're a kid and you're screaming about how your shirt is too itchy, somebody probably would, if they weren't compassionate or attuned to you, would probably just say, that's not a big deal, suck it up. But
yeah, stop crying. Why are you crying?
yeah.
Some other things that have helped us with our ADHD, I meditate a lot now. That's been very helpful. I think what the meditation is doing for me is teaching me how to be bored. So I'm less needing to fix my boredom with TikTok and Instagram and things like that. And I've also actually removed Instagram and TikTok from my phone. And I've realized I just have this tick where I just pick up my phone and I open Instagram. But now that Instagram's not there, I open it and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I put it back down. I think a whole part of that is like mindfulness and awareness and like, why are you doing what you're doing? What does it mean? I turn off all of my phone notifications except for my Google Calendar so that I don't get interrupted when I'm doing something important, and so that my attention doesn't get drawn away from me, because if you leave those all on, it's just constantly popping. Like I cannot handle that.
Can you give an overview of how you came to meditation and why, and how you actually started doing it? Because I think for a lot of people, like myself included, in like 2020, this was not ADHD related. It was really more mental health and like inner peace related. But I tried to get into meditation, and even sitting down for a 2-minute meditation, a guided one, even where the woman's voice was so pleasant and the content was nice, I found it extremely emotionally uncomfortable, overwhelming, very hard to not distract myself, or very hard to keep redirecting myself back to the meditation. So do you have any tips? I know you're studying to be a meditation teacher as well. I think that would probably be helpful to hear about how you got started with it and how you've managed to keep up with it to the point that you have now.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a whole episode on its own.
I think that is a whole episode, actually.
So I will say this. So meditation is not the act of clearing your thoughts from your head. Meditation is like watching your thoughts, being present, and watching your thoughts non-judgmentally. Mm-hmm. So when you're sitting there and you're thinking about like, I should clear my head, but oh no, now I have a thought. Oh no, now I'm bad. Like, oh, I'm not meditating. Like that's not what you want to be doing, because you want to be approaching it with like self-love. And so when you will have thoughts, that is your brain. You will have a thought. You will not, most people, unless you're like practicing for a long time, will not be able to clear their mind. There will be thoughts that come in. So it's just like, I just want to tell people that, just to normalize it. You do have thoughts when you meditate. So when you do get a thought in, it's like you just kind of are aware that you're thinking. So you can even label it like, oh, now I'm thinking. And then you try to non-judgmentally let the thought go. Like whatever the thought was, don't judge yourself on it for having that thought or whatever the thought was. Because sometimes we have negative thoughts and then we feel like we're bad people for like even having a negative thought. But you can't control your thoughts. They're just thoughts. So the more that you can understand that they're just thoughts, the more you can have self-compassion for yourself, the more that you can let it go. And then the whole practice of meditation to me is just sitting there and realizing that you have the thoughts. And the longer that you can sit and practice watching your own thoughts, the more that you can become present in your day-to-day life and like be aware of your next move instead of just blindly reacting and like moving through your life through just habits and ingrained habits, then you can be present and actually choose your next step and what you want to do next. So I think that's why it's been so helpful for me, because now I'm learning how to watch myself, and I'm learning how to pause and actually consider my next step. I'm learning how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
That's really, really helpful. Like you said, it's just a practice. And once you can recognize that, then it sort of makes it easier to understand that, like, this one practice doesn't need to be the best thing that you've ever done. It doesn't need to be life-changing. It just needs to be what it is. That's something that I'm working on too. And I think probably for many people with ADHD, especially if they kind of fell into this a similar category as me, which I know many of my followers do, because a lot of people have messaged me to say that they can relate. But that, like, gifted child, and especially a girl that has grown up with that label gifted, we internalized a lot of our hyperactivity. And so that is like the person with the racing thoughts, who may look from the outside like they're paying attention, like they're present, but internally is just like on a hamster wheel. And I used to describe my brain like that. Like, it was just constant hamster wheel, never stopped moving. And I would be so overwhelmed constantly. And it's only quite recently that, and I think these are habits that have been building over time. But one of the things that has helped me the most, which we've talked about pretty much in every episode, and we'll probably keep talking about it, because I don't think I'll ever stop talking about how helpful cold therapy has been for me, cold plunging, because of all of the reasons. And I think it's one of the most perfect habits for somebody with ADHD is cold plunging. And I will tell you why. Because as people with ADHD, it's difficult for us to want to commit to a habit that seems so calm, peaceful, boring, like meditation does. Because truthfully, it does. If you have never done it, and if you're not in the practice of doing it, sitting still and observing your thoughts sounds like horrible. It sounds like torture. So I think cold plunging brings in a level of excitement and adrenaline and novelty and sensory input that just sitting down in a room meditating doesn't. So I think that for somebody who, for myself, I'm often sensory seeking. I seek sensory input. Like I like ginger candies and ginger kombucha. I like fizzy drinks. If any of this is relatable to you, just Google sensory seeking. And it's a very common facet of many neurodivergent people. And of course, I'm sensory avoidant in other ways, but I'm very often sensory seeking. And I think many people with ADHD are. So we're looking for the novelty. We're bored. We're looking for the stimulation. That's why it's so easy to sit and scroll on social media for 3 hours and not even realize time's gone by. And then suddenly you're hungry and you're depleted and you need food, because the sensory input you're constantly seeking is there for you. And it's there in many different ways. So I think that the cold plunge is a way to get that sensory input, because it's like full body sensory input. Like it is so deeply intense that it actually is a really great way to practice breathing and practice being present. And one thing that I find helpful if you're just starting with cold plunging is to play a song for the length of your cold plunge, and that way you know when the song's over that you can get out. I do that when I do my cold showers. And often when I'm doing the cold plunge in the bath, like I will listen to a specific length meditation, and I find that really helpful for me to focus on the guided meditation and to just kind of I sort of take the focus off of my body, but the sensory input is still there. So it's a much different experience than trying to sit down and meditate, but the effects I've been able to extrapolate to my daily life outside of the cold plunge, which is really, I think, the goal. It's just been like life-changing for me. And I think one other additional aspect that's really helpful for people with ADHD is that it's a challenge. I think so many of us, it's really interesting, but we often struggle with basic tasks. Like I'm so bored with making breakfast. Like I don't fucking want to wake up and just sit there in front of the stove and make food that I've had before. Big whoop. But guess what? I have a body and it needs to be fed. And I guess I have to do that. But it's not challenging. It's not exciting. And I don't want to do it. Cold plunging, however, especially since I've made it a daily challenge for myself, and it's non-negotiable. I've done it every single day since November 23rd, and I will continue to do it. Minimum 2-minute cold shower. If I don't get in the cold plunge, I will do a cold shower for 2 minutes. Non-negotiable. It creates a level of intensity, excitement, challenge that I think we need as people with ADHD, especially if we are sensory seeking. So if you're listening to this and this is something that resonates with you, I challenge you to do a cold plunge every day for the next week and then come back to me and tell me what you think and how you feel. There you go. Here's a challenge from me to you.
Cold plunging, I say it's basically meditation on steroids, because when you get into the water, the only thing that you can really do is focus on your breathing. And you want to focus on your breathing. That's the whole point of cold plunging, because you are teaching your nervous system how to calm down. So when you hit the water, you instantly freak out, probably every time. And you are training your mind how to be like, I am calm in this situation. I am safe. I'm okay. And then once you reach that little Zen state in the cold water, you can kind of hang out there for a long time. But you still kind of have to focus. If you lose your focus, you can kind of hop out of it. So you're continually teaching yourself, like, I'm calm, I'm safe, I can do this, I can do hard things. And I think that is what is so magical about the cold plunge. Like, when people tell you to meditate, they tell you to meditate for like 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour. That's how you get the benefits from meditation. Nobody says that about cold plunging. They're like 2 minutes, that's all you need. And that's so much more attainable for us. And if you don't have a tub, it's honestly just as good in the cold shower. The cold shower actually feels harder because the water's moving and it's constantly hitting you. I do think the benefits are greater in the cold tub, but the cold shower is a great option if you don't have a tub.
100%. And that's why I said, and I think this also ties into another point I wanted to make, but have different tiers of your habits. That is something I definitely wanted to talk about because we talked about it the other day. But have different options for yourself. This is a tip that I have seen on multiple different accounts that I follow on TikTok, and that I think is incredibly helpful for anyone who's neurodivergent. But if you have a habit that you want to follow, for example, maybe your habit is going for a hike. So in order to go for a hike, you have to get in your car, you have to drive to the trailhead, and you have to park. But what if you're having a really low energy day? So you have to have kind of low, medium, and high options for your habits. So for me, if my top tier habit is going for a hike, driving maybe it's 7 or 8 minutes to the trailhead, going for an hour-long walk around the trail, that's wonderful. I get to be in the forest, I get to experience, I get to be immersed in that experience. However, that's really not realistic for me on a day-to-day basis. So then maybe my second tier is I walk around the block. Okay, what about a really low energy day? What if I'm in the midst of a depressive episode? What if I wake up and just everything is like on high alert for my sensory needs, and I can barely go into the kitchen, let alone leave my bed. So maybe my lowest tier of that is walk outside into the backyard and stand there. That's great. I got outside, I got fresh air, I'm letting my eyes and my brain and my body acclimate to the views of nature, which we know is extremely helpful for our mental health. And so it's the same for me with the cold plunge. There are days where I sit in the cold plunge, and I have done 22 minutes. And there's been times where I've listened to an 8-minute meditation in the cold plunge. And those are amazing. It's amazing when I can quiet my mind and quiet my breathing to the point that I can stay in for that long and gain those benefits. And I don't think that you need to be doing 20 minutes. I don't think that that's like the highest end. But I think for me, some of the most helpful cold plunges I've had are ones where I've stayed in and listened to a full 8-minute meditation. Those are ones where I've left feeling really calm, centered, grounded. However, that being said, maybe on a lower, like a medium energy, maybe I go into the cold bath for 3 minutes. That's still wonderful. I still gain those benefits. And then on a low, like the lowest energy day, I've done this for a couple of days of my period, the first 2 days of my period, where my energy levels were zip. I definitely didn't have the capacity to take off my clothes and get into the cold tub and feel that full body sensory experience and then have to get out. Because the cold tub is not in the bathroom, it's like in the garage. So on the lowest energy version of that, I will do my 2-minute cold shower, and then I will switch it immediately to hot and warm up my body and just get those beautiful benefits of the cold, but on a lower scale, and that's fine. Like you have to understand and learn for yourself, like what these different tiers are and what your capacity is on any given day, and just try as hard as you can to let it be what it is. Just let it be. It's a low energy day. Okay. Let it be what it is. Don't punish yourself. Don't force yourself to do more than you're capable of doing that day, because you're human, and you're a human with unique needs, and you have to learn how to accommodate those as peacefully as you can. Please try to be nicer to yourself. Please, please, please try to learn that. It's so difficult to learn, but your life will get so much easier when you stop hating yourself and punishing yourself.
That's another very important thing that we've had to learn that has changed our lives, definitely, is self-love and self-compassion. I want to add on to your tiered habit idea. I think it's very important that we eat most of our meals at home, because like when you eat out, it's usually processed. That's just the most of it. And when other people are cooking your food, they just want it to be hyper palatable so that you come back for more. So it's high salt content, high fat content. You just don't want to be eating that for every single meal. So I believe that the more meals you cook at home, the healthier you will be in the long term. So on a high energy day, you could do a full out dinner, pasta, tofu, sauce, veggies, salad, all of that. And then on a medium energy day, what I would probably do is I would cook a pack of instant noodles and throw in like 2 eggs, and that would be my meal. And then on an extremely low energy day, I would probably have frozen TV dinners and microwave that. And then say you don't even want to microwave anything, I would grab like a protein bar and drink orange juice. So like this is how you can make the system work for you. It's basically planning in advance for your low energy days and knowing what you can do to accommodate yourself, to be kind to yourself, and still work on all of these habits that are so important to you and your long-term goals.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And I think there's no shame in getting your meals or your food or your nutrients from wherever you get it. So if you are in a place in your life where you're ordering out every single day all the time, there's no shame in that. And there's no timeline by which you need to follow a certain way of eating or way of life. And to be honest, whatever works for you is what works for you. If you found a restaurant that you really like that accommodates your sensory and your food needs, and the food is great and it's cooked the same way every time, and you just don't want to cook for yourself, then do that. Because the way that you're getting fed is if you're getting fed and you're getting what your body wants and needs, that's way better than nitpicking every single thing that you eat like I used to do, and feeling like if I couldn't cook at home, if I didn't have the capacity to cook for myself, and I didn't have the food in the house all the time that I needed, that I stopped having shame over that, over putting in an order on DoorDash, or for me, I went through a period of time this summer. I was going through a really intense depressive episode that was stemming from multiple different struggles in my life. And there were many days where I had so little energy that I barely had food in the house. I couldn't cook for myself. And there were some days where I barely ate anything all day, and that was so not good for me. So one of my kind of like safe foods, and one of my like foods that hits many different sensory needs and it's cooked exactly right every single time is there's these breakfast sandwiches from Odd Burger. They're like a tofu, like a vegan tofu based, basically like an egg McMuffin. So it has like ham tofu, vegan ham tofu, like a hash brown and vegan cheese. And it's like the exact right taste that I want, especially on a really bad day. And one time I DoorDashed, I think like 8 of them. And I had like 4, and that was my meal. And I saved the rest for later, and I saved some of them for breakfast the next day. So all that to say, like, however you're getting your needs met right now is enough and is great. And I think all of these habits are just things that we're like working towards, like 1% better, a little bit, like just do what you can do with the capacity you have now.
Yeah, it's consistency. Like, I agree with you. If it's working for you, if you don't have the capacity to cook at home at all, just feed yourself, because that's more important. But it's consistency over the long term. Like, you have to know what your long-term goals are and just be inching towards that. And sometimes our goals change. Like, sometimes if we're in a depressive episode, the goal is no longer to cook at home. The goal is survival. So then your habits change and adapt to that. And that's totally understandable. There's nothing wrong with that. It's having the self-compassion to understand that that's okay and that you need to change your focus for now, because surviving is more important than a 5-star home-cooked meal.
Yeah. And I think another thing that you post about a lot and that you've created YouTube videos around as well is cooking for people with ADHD and for people who may need tips to make it easier and quicker. So if that's something you're interested in, check out Tina's YouTube and her Instagram, because I know that that's content you have put out in the past. And yeah, every little bit helps. Like, I think for me, I do feel like a sense of power and purpose and excitement when I have cooked a really good meal for myself. And it hits all the things that I want, and it's got the right taste, and it's something I know I can make again consistently. One thing that I learned recently, like, that I don't know if I fully understood, but that I can make like soup and different sauces. Like, I made this amazing cashew based blush sauce, and I blended in a bunch of veggies too. I blended in carrots and onions, and it's all blended, and there's like no chunks or textures or anything. And I can freeze it. Like, for some reason, that wasn't a concept that I fully understood, was that so many of the meals I make are very, very easily frozen. So that when I'm having a low energy day, I can take out that I can thaw that jar of cashew-based pasta sauce that I made, that I spent all this time making, and I can have that, and it's easier. So there's hacks like to make your life easier.
There's so many, and I think we could keep talking forever and ever, because we've discovered a lot of hacks for ourselves. But I think maybe to wrap up the episode, I think like an overlying theme amongst everything that we're going to talk about is self-love. You have to have self-love. And then the number 2 thing I would say is that incremental progress is still progress. I feel like as people with ADHD that feel like we always need to be productive and like overperforming, like sometimes it feels like 1% is not enough, but it actually is. And just take the 1%, take the win, and go with it.
That's a great point, because it doesn't seem like enough often.
And then you feel bad because you're not doing enough. But anyway, I think we're good for today.
Yeah, I feel like we went over so many different tips and tricks.
If you guys have any questions, if we missed anything, please let us know. We're happy to answer and happy to research if we don't know the answer. But thank you so much for joining us. We're really enjoying this, and we hope you are too.
Yes, I have been loving all of your feedback, so please keep DMing us, tagging us in your stories. If you can, send us a like and a subscribe on YouTube, subscribe and follow us on Spotify, leave us a review. All these little things mean so much to us, and if you do take the time to do it, just please know we appreciate you so much. But beyond the reviews and the likes, I think what really fulfills me the most, and I think you're getting a lot of enjoyment out of it as well, is just seeing people's feedback and seeing people resonate with our content and send us messages saying, wow, like I have, you know, like saying that they feel seen, and that just like warms my heart so much. All I want for all of us unique, sensitive, beautiful souls is to feel loved and to know that you're not alone. So thank you so much for being here, and we love you, and we will see you next time.
We're shamelessly sensitive.
Shamelessly sensitive.
Yay.